Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I'm your host, Matt Scott, and I'm with my co-host, Scott Brady. We have a super special guest here today, Graham Jackson. Graham's been around the overland world in the United States and abroad for basically since...
Conception.
We have a cool little memento here. This is the very first issue of Overland Journal. I remember seeing this when I was 17 years old when it came out.
I was a few years older than that.
Yeah, and on the cover...
Oh, God, here we go.
It's Graham Jackson's Defender.
How old we are.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to talk about his TransAfrica trip that he did in 2004. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about kind of the inception of the overland community and industry in the United States. We're going to talk about the trips he's done since then. And then he also has some really, really cool things happening in the future.
A special thanks to Hankook Dynapro Tires for supporting this week's podcast. Visit expeditionportal.com to see our content series in partnership with Hankook, where you'll learn about this year's Jeep Beach event in Daytona, Florida, get tips on exploring the Ocala National Forest, and take a tour of the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America at the Daytona International Speedway. We also take a close look at how to choose a mud terrain, all-terrain, or hybrid rugged terrain tire using the Hankook Dynapro tire lineup as examples.
You know, and I have to say that, like, when I got started in all this stuff, there was three things that inspired me before I even really got into overlanding. The first one was the Camel Trophy. That was the first thing that I encountered when I was still kind of a multi-sport athlete. And then the second one was Gary and Monica Westcott that I would read in Four Wheeler magazine. Yeah. And then the third one was Nathan Hinman and Graham Jackson and the stuff that you guys were doing with Pangea and your trip. I mean, I was wide-eyed of like, because the one thing that made you guys really stand out was the quality of the content. It was like, it was the imagery that was, it was very up to date, and these are other Americans that are doing this, and it just showed me that this was possible. So, I mean, Graham, you and Nathan, who I still get to talk with Nathan on occasion, just so grateful for you guys both inspiring me in the ways you did. So,
well, I came from a very similar background, right? So I was looking at Camel Trophy, obviously, because I applied to it, and then Tom Shepard, of course, and Chris Scott, and all of these people who are my heroes.
Yes,
and now I consider them like people I can just email and talk to, and like they'll answer my questions, which blows my mind to this day. Yeah, it's craziness.
Feels like the Matrix sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's all these things coming down.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like different generations because I was watching you guys.
I know. I mean,
but isn't that the neat thing about a community is that they're by nature, the passage of time happens. Yeah. You know, Tom Shepard just turned 90.
I know, yeah.
You know, bless him, because he's such a legend, such an inspiration to me too. Yeah. So, but you know, and I'm in my early 50s now, and Graham's 36, stuck in time somehow, because he looks exactly the same.
Kind of you to say, but yes, early 50s too. So,
I'm going to get some photographic evidence of age
of babyface Scott at the beginning.
I know.
Yep, and you haven't aged.
I was actually like the poster child for the Dunning-Kruger effect during that photo, because I thought I had figured everything out and I knew nothing. So,
well, that's where we all were, right?
Yeah.
So back in 2003, I think I met you in. It was either 2003 or 2004 in Moab at a gas station.
That's right.
I'm fueling up the Defender.
Did you guys both have snorkels? And you're like, wow, let's be friends.
No, he comes diving across the highway and like comes skidding in a Tacoma, like, you know.
That's probably very accurate.
It wasn't Earth give way below it because it was so heavy.
Oh, jeez. That poor truck. That poor truck.
But yeah, and that's when we first met. And we're like, oh, wow, this is really cool.
That.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Totally.
So what was really the first kind of event or community thing that brought people together in this space? Because I wasn't around then. I can't even talk about this stuff.
The community event that brought.
I know that there was like the Expedition Trophy.
Yeah, it was probably started with the Expedition Trophy.
Yeah, probably at scale, but then even before that was 4-wheel drive trips, which was a forum that was very early. And that brought a lot of people together, and there was some little gatherings off of that. Certainly, the Land Rover National Rally was a place that a lot of travelers would come to.
So that was the Sully Hill Society, and like a lot of people came to that. But you were kind of in the Toyota space.
Yes, that's right.
But you still came to that. And no, it was probably those little events like that. Yeah, and then from that it exploded into the other things came along. Like you started Expedition Portal, and Overland Journal came out of that.
Did Overland Trophy, was that before
Overland?
Expedition Trophy?
Sorry, was before.
There's only two words in this industry, and I just got them mixed up. So Expedition Trophy,
we're gonna trip over
was kind of the start, and that was, I guess, that was kind of like trying to be a little bit of a camel trophy because of a bit of a competition.
Absolutely, that was what it started as. Was all of us really wanted something like the camel trophy to exist again. Yeah, and Expedition Portal had really started to grow, so I knew that we needed a place to get together for all of us to get together, and that was probably 2005 was the maybe 2005 was the first year. 2005.
Okay, because I think when that popped up, I was 15 and lurking, I'm gonna get myself a Land Rover for my first car, but I didn't really drive it.
I'm gonna go and drive in the camel trophy.
Yeah.
Well, we were all like that.
We were all like that.
It was so innocent. So talk me through kind of what the concept and the format of the Expedition Trophy.
Yeah, I mean, it really was my very poor attempt at trying to do a camel trophy. Some of the things that were fun about it that I'd love to at some point do again, maybe even just like an invite kind of a thing for a bunch of the OGs. But what we would do is we would give a waypoint of where you had to meet for the Expedition Trophy. So that was one thing that was unique about it.
Yeah.
And people would get lost for hours.
Well, and you didn't just plug that into Google Maps back then.
No. You had to go character by character into your early Magellan or Garmin, and there was no
yellow E-Trex things.
There was no there was no base maps. So you're actually having to take out topo maps and figure where you were at, and sometimes people would never make it. They would get lost and give up, and so it made it a little bit difficult to get there. And then we would do things like building bridges over crevasses and climbing up sand hills, and having to swap your front tire to your back tire with only one jack. I mean, we did all this crazy fun stuff, and then from that, I was actually contacted by the Marines to start to do some training, and that was when we actually started to make a little bit of money. And Graham was involved with that. So Graham and I, Graham and I did overland training together, and we trained the Marines and a bunch of the special operations teams like CAG and everything else. But I wouldn't have a business at all if it wasn't for those early training things, because that's actually how I paid the bills.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because Expedition Portal made no money, the Expedition Trophy made no money, you know. So if it wasn't for the U.S. government.
And that was all under, that was under Overland Training.
Yep.
So that was under Overland, that was
or was
under
that
Overland
Expeditions
Training.
West? So
well, they were both the same. They were one and the same at the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
So and actually what I'm going to talk about here, that event sounds really fun and I want to do it.
Well,
it was fun.
Maybe people will give us some feedback that they'd like to do it again.
So I've been talking to Scott Jensen, and he said, well, maybe we should go and do that and just give people a waypoint.
Yeah, I love that. So. Well, if you guys need the Expedition Trophy domain, let's do it.
All right, yeah, we could do that. Yeah.
We'd love to.
It'd be fun
to
just
support.
to actually it was more of a thought of just getting those people all back together in the same space.
And who were some of those people that are kind of still around this space?
Oh, certainly
Mario Donovan
and Jonathan and Roseanne Hansen were key to all that.
Yep.
Mario.
Paul May
was there.
Yep.
Wow.
Justin Pitcairn.
Yeah, Justin
who still shows up for Goose Gear and
he
stuff
does.
Like that.
Yeah. I still have this photo of him jumping his Jeep and his AT Overland trailer.
Yep. Oh, I've heard of this. That was
six
him?
wheels. All six wheels were in the air. Yep. I didn't think that was possible, but we actually have it documented. Yeah. So I mean, James and Stacy Roy. Yep. I mean,
Andrew Moore.
Yeah, Andrew was another one.
Yeah, there were a bunch of people who are still on the Chuck.
Yeah,
Chuck Hathcock.
That's right.
I think what's so cool
so many cool people.
This was 20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
That's not an insignificant amount of time ago. And how many of these people are genuinely within like a couple 100 feet of us right now? Because we're recording this at Overland
At
Expo.
Overland Expo, I would say a good half dozen of them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, man, that's so
sure.
cool. I think it says a lot to the character of the people and the community that people are still engaging and doing this stuff.
Well, it's a passion
together,
for people, right? It started out as a passion. It was never. I don't think I have yet to make any money out of it. It's always been a passion project. It's always been something kind of on the side, and some people have made a run of it. Like Mario's made a run of it.
Yeah, for
Paul
sure.
may have made a run of it, and they actually have built businesses around it and created this passion for overlanding into something bigger, which has brought together a much larger community, and it's sort of grown and grown and grown, and then I guess it sort of scaled to sort of industrial level at one point. And I think that was kind of the topping out point.
Yeah.
And I think maybe COVID had something to do with,
Definitely.
It was kind of at that peaky point where I was thinking, do I even still want to be part of that?
That makes sense.
I think a lot of people were having that, but we're all still here.
It became a sort of an identity crisis thing.
Yeah.
And then after COVID, we had a whole lot of people jump into it.
Yeah.
And then training them. And then, like, introducing them to how it used to be and how the past and things like that was really actually kind of cool. And I think that invigorated me back to the teaching side of things.
Yeah, the stuff that you did with 7P
that was awesome. Yeah,
was awesome.
And it was unfortunate we couldn't make a run of it.
Yeah.
Because I think there is now, even today, a hole in the training space.
That's right. And you guys were the ones that filled it. I mean, the number of times on our podcast we talked about 7P as the place that people needed to go.
It was such a great collection of
I mean,
trainers.
Nick, and just like, I mean, Duncan. I mean,
Andy,
unbelievable, unbelievable human beings.
Yep, awesome people. But we made it a tenet of that company that friendship became before the company.
Yeah,
and so when we realized that the tensions were sort of, because it was a side gig for everybody, when the tensions were sort of getting to the point where we were like, this is going, this might break friendships, that's when we called it. And I think that was a smart thing to do, but it did leave a hole behind, because I even today, or even yesterday, I've been talking to people at the Overland Expo who they miss that. They want that. They still want to be able to go out and build bridges and pontoons and float trucks across rivers and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Where
on
there's
any
maybe
Tuesday.
not a shortage of four-wheel drive trainers, you guys were just so different because you had all of this travel experience. So people that wanted to go travel and really do this stuff, they would have, I mean, geez, like consider the names you just mentioned. There's like hundreds of years of experience of international vehicle-based travel.
I think for 7P we calculated out one time it was 175 years worth of expedition experience that we had for the people who owned it.
And
we were very pragmatic. We were very, and I think there's a pragmatism to it that is very accessible to people, right? They realize that there are a bunch of rules and there are a bunch of things that you can throw out there as rules, but you've got to know when we're out in a really remote place, you can't just throw everything away and die.
Yep.
You've got to take a pragmatic approach to getting out of it, which I think is
one
of those keys.
There's definitely been times that I have taken everything that I'm not supposed to take out of the recovery kit to get out.
Exactly.
It's like, nope, that's not rated. Oh, no, that's not supposed to be used for that. But that's sometimes it's what you got to do to get out.
So we had all this training that kind of came out of the Expedition Trophy.
And Overland Experts is another good example. They're East Coast based, so I thought they were a pretty good parallel to 7P on the East Coast.
But I want to drag us back to kind of the formation of a lot of this community and industry. So Overland Expo kind of happened, I guess, after the Expedition Trophy.
Right. So we had, I mean, it's kind of the time frame. Right? We had Overland Journal and then Expedition Portal and then the Expedition Trophy and then Overland Expo.
Yep.
Kind of came out of that.
The first year for Expo was
2009.
2009, and that was in Prescott at the little horse track there.
Right, and there were like 400 people that showed up.
That's right.
Total.
Yeah.
And then we moved that to south of Tucson.
Amato,
and then it was there for 2 years, I think, and then it moved up to Flagstaff.
Mormon Lake.
And Mormon Lake days were legendary because we were building
gnarly.
Yeah, we were building.
Really
I mean, Land Rover came in and was spending almost $100,000 to build a driving course, and
Yeah.
we had a great agreement with them, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
And that's when Duncan and Andy and the Camel Trophy guys came on board with Bob Burns, and that was just a legendary time because that's
Yeah.
when we were building pontoon bridges and
I guess that's kind of
all
was
that
that,
kind of
that,
cool
that
stuff.
extension of the things that you guys were doing on Expedition Trophy in a way.
Oh, for sure.
It was an extension of it, but it wasn't quite the same. It wasn't
Yeah.
competitive. It was
Yeah.
more. We kind of turned the
Probably
corner
still fun
from
for you guys though.
No, it was. It was kind of. It was more. It moved from us all kind of trying to recreate the Camel Trophy to, well, there's a whole bunch of people here who want to be involved, but they don't. They are itching for training because nobody's born with the knowledge of how to drive one of these trucks across the Sahara, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't born with it. You weren't born with it.
Most
We
certainly not.
learned from somewhere,
Yeah.
and a lot of us learned from the VDEG from Tom Shepard.
That's
And
right.
then we kind of realized that the training side of it was just a key component, and that sort of became the focus for Overland Expo at that time, and it was amazing. And then we, as a group of people who were doing the training at Overland Expo, decided, well, we could do this when Overland Expo is not happening.
Yeah,
so we
and
created
that's 7P.
that was 7P, and
Yeah.
7P grew out of that whole thing.
Yeah, it's just
It's
it's
a weird
interesting to kind
progression.
of just to dig into a little bit of where it all came from, right? Because this is now like we're sitting at Overland Expo and it's
About 500 vendors
like
and
Toyota's
30,000
there
people.
and, you know,
Yeah.
Firestone's there, and
And Lexus is here,
Yeah.
and
it's crazy. It's crazy, but it's cool to see still how many of the same faces are. So now what I want to do is I want to bounce. I'm going to go in the Wayback Machine here.
Oh boy.
Because we've never talked about your TransAfrica expedition.
Okay. Yep.
And that just had to happen at an absolutely crazy time because
It
the
did.
world is so different now. It's so interconnected. It's so comparatively easy to travel.
Right.
Much easier now than when you did it.
And I'd love to kind of maybe use that as a little bit of a guide of, you
Right.
know, like
How do we do that?
I've always been doing this with an iPhone.
Yep.
You know, I mean, it's like, frankly, like I had an iPhone in high school. Like that's just exactly how it was.
Right.
There were no iPhones in 2004 in Africa.
Nope. So we used the Horizons Unlimited bulletin board, which came actually before Expedition Portal.
That's
and
right.
It was a more
And that was kind of
international
more
thing.
motorcycle focused,
It was
though, right?
totally more motorcycle.
Or that's where
focused.
they've gone, at least.
No, they were motorcycle focused
Yeah.
back then. But Chris Scott.
But real
was on it.
travelers, real travelers.
It was just
There's
world-
a lot of moto travelers.
Yep.
Still are.
They're a bit esoteric, right? So motorcycle people, by their nature, are more that you're by yourself on the bike usually,
Yeah.
or it's just you and somebody else. And back then there wasn't helmet comms and all of that kind of thing, so it was a little bit more, I think, a solo thing.
And rough and tumble travel.
Rough and tumble
Yeah.
travel,
Yeah.
and minimalist because
Yeah,
you couldn't take all this stuff with you. You
Right.
couldn't. You didn't.
So
have,
that was like your big planning resource.
that was the big planning resource, but we were doing it by truck. So that's where I met Chris Scott.
Yeah.
And I was just lucky enough to run into people like him and Tom Shepard who were willing to give advice to some, young kid who decided that buying a Land Rover and driving through Africa was a great idea.
Yeah.
And that came out of my parents.
Because you were born in the UK, but you did grow up in Africa, didn't you?
No, I was born in Africa. I was born
you
in
were born in
Lesotho-
Africa.
I was born in Lesotho.
Oh, that's right.
And
That's
grew up
right.
in South Africa. I've never lived in the UK. I had a British passport.
Oh, that's what it
just
is.
because of my
Yeah,
parents.
got it.
And my parents always wanted to drive from South Africa or Southern Africa back to Europe when they were done with their time in Southern Africa. But they immigrated to the U.S. instead, and we never did that trip. And it was always in my head. I was like, well, this trip is in my head. I have to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the weird thing about me. I get trips get stuck in my head, and then I have to go and do them. And that might come up later on for the future stuff. But yeah, in 2004, it took me a couple of years to convince my wife Connie that it was a great idea. As you can imagine,
Sure.
right? Africa's a very far off world to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And
Particularly the places that you were going. I mean, some
Right.
of the
Yeah,
places
West Africa is no joke.
Yeah.
Some of the places that you went on this trip, like, are effectively inaccessible.
Mali is right now. Niger.
I mean,
is
you
really
can
tough.
go,
You
but
can go.
you wouldn't.
It's
It wouldn't
tough.
be advised.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you go into the State Department website, absolutely, it's not advised.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of those things that people. It's one of those education things, right?
Yeah.
People think of those places as hard to get to because of what they see on the news, but the human beings on the ground in any country on the entire earth are just looking to do the same things. They're looking to have a good day, educate their children, find a better life for their kids, and just move forward. And that's what they're there to do. And 99% of the people you meet on the road are just that, right? And they'd be willing to help you. You know, if you've broken down or you need food or you need to find out where to go to here to cross the border, they'll be absolutely happy to help you. And it's not a bunch of it's not a bunch of evil people out there.
That's the great thing about driving a Land Rover is you do need help.
Oh, come on.
So you started in London, England, or UK,
started at my parents'
wherever.
place, in UK, and then drove down, went across the Channel, into France, drove down, stopped in Paris, went all the way down to Spain as fast as we could. We were just like blazing. I was blazing. I'm like, I've got to get to Africa. I've been through Europe before. All the people
did the ferry to Morocco.
Ferry to Morocco, and then started going down through Morocco, Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Chad.
Yeah, because this was still like Paris Dakar times, you know.
It was 100% Paris Dakar times.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And then, oh wow, so was it even Western Sahara then?
It was still kind of like it is now. So there was Morocco still controlled Western Sahara. So the people, the Sahrawi called it Western Sahara, whereas the Moroccans called it Morocco.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things. And it was you traveled through it, and you had to be cognizant of that there was a political thing happening there. But you just had. But again, we had no problems. There was the minefield going between Morocco and Mauritania, which was for me like a big pinch point.
Yeah.
Because I've heard about it, and online I'd heard about it, and people talked about it, and I talked to Chris Scott about it, and he was like, you'd probably be best to get a guide, and just a guide to guide you across that through the minefield. And I was like, oh. And I didn't want to say too much to my traveling companions.
Yeah,
and
sure.
The stress level in me was like skyrocketing, and
there wasn't just like a road.
Well, that's the thing. I didn't think there was. So literally, I did not think there was.
But that's crazy that's like that was even like a concept of part of the journey.
It's still a problem in a lot of Africa.
I know
just
there's areas that there are mined, but like that you would have to get
a guide
that's
to get
so cool though.
But then I got to that border and realized that there's a ton of traffic driving back and
follow
forth.
the heavy trucks.
And just follow the heavy trucks. And so we followed the heavy trucks and went past a bombed out Land Rover, which is kind of legendary at the time, and just drove on through. And the people there are just like, there are mines over there, but we have to cross this border every day. So we do the thing. And that was a massive education to me that suddenly it's not as... people live in these places. They cross these borders.
They make dinner at night.
They make dinner at night. They have their kids. They have friends. They do
all
the
thing.
Same
we're all the same creatures, right?
Exactly. We're the same everywhere. And so it was awesome. And I realized I was like, massive big pinch point number one didn't turn out to be so bad.
I mean, so Mauritania today is...
Yeah, it's pretty tough to get into.
How am I trying to say this? Mauritania is wild.
It is wild.
There's not a lot going on there. Like it's very even today it's remote. There's I don't want to use the word primitive.
No,
but back then. Wow.
Back then it was, but it hasn't come quite as far as you might think of other countries in Africa.
Did you make it to Timbuktu?
No, so we didn't because the GSPCC, I think, is what they were, which became Al Qaeda in North Africa. They were actually kidnapping overlanders at that time.
Got it.
And we were really cognizant of that, and realized that maybe going to Timbuktu wasn't a great idea. And one of the biggest regrets of my life was the day we were on that highway, not a highway, on that track, and deciding whether we were going to turn left and go up to Timbuktu or not. And we decided not to. And I
think everybody has those things.
I regret that. Like, I wish we would have done it, because at the time you could have done it.
Yeah.
And I talked to people who did do it. And at the time,
it was
our risk. Our risk analysis was not that. And
Didn't Christian do it in like a Las Vegas limo that they shipped over to Africa?
Yes, exactly. And I'm like, oh, come on.
I think that limo is still in Timbuktu, as I recall.
Yeah. So it was just one of those, but you make decisions. And the GSPCC are the people who closed down Darfur at that time.
Sure.
Because our plan had been to go all the way across to East Africa and come down the East Coast, and that's when we realized we couldn't do it. And literally that was going into an internet cafe in Niger and finding out that
so cool.
This border's closed, you're not going to get through there. And so we're like, well, we're just going to have to turn right and go down the West Coast and figure that out.
Yeah.
And we just had to figure it out on the fly.
And that is the West Coast is still, the West Coast of Africa is still one of the most challenging overland routes in the world of any length.
Yeah.
And
Right.
you did it
Cross-border rings,
did it so early. I mean,
Yep.
what is there? There's at least 12 border crossings, maybe a few more than that.
Yeah.
You know, and you're getting, at the time there was no e-visas.
Nope.
So you had to go into every capital city. You had to get
a
go
visa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gnarly.
So we had one of the biggest problems was crossing the Congos, and then the other one was Angola.
Yeah. And Angola's not a
northern
big deal.
Angola was basically just come off a war. Right?
Yeah, sure.
We have this.
Oh yeah, there you go.
map
Look at that
here.
map.
There's the
Can
map.
you buy this issue?
Yeah, you can still buy the first issue of Overland Journal.
Oh man, it's so cool. It's so cool. But just to it's a journey back time. And I'm going through this and I'm like, wow man, like you went to Chad. Like people don't really go.
They don't
They
really
don't
do
go
that,
to
yeah.
Chad, and you know.
They should. It's gorgeous. It's amazing. But
Oh,
yes,
man.
it's tough. But the great thing was then I came out of that and then gave my track log to Chris Scott and he published it in Sahara Overland issue 2.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy shit, right? This is my hero.
I know.
And I've just contributed to his second edition of his book. And I was like, wow, I'm blowing my own mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like how neat is it? Like you think about a guy like Chris Scott, and every time I get to talk with him, I do feel such an
Right, yeah.
honor
Yeah.
because he has never departed from who he was.
He's so down to earth,
Yep.
right? Tom Shepard's the same way.
Same
Just
way, incredible
absolute
human beings.
down to earth people,
Yep.
bend over backwards for you,
Yep.
don't have a massive ego. It's
No.
just one of those things. And I think, honestly, in this industry, you the people who have stayed are those people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
sure.
It's amazing. It's awesome.
So, you obviously finished this trip in Southern Africa and
Yep.
South Africa.
Yep.
But then recently you did a trip with a troopie with I
Yes.
believe with Jonathan and Roseanne,
Yep.
and that was kind of cool because you bought troopies in Australia,
Uh-huh.
traveled around there, and then shipped them to Southern Africa.
Southern Africa,
And
yeah,
then,
so
and
it was-
then did you ship back or did you drive?
No, we shipped back. So it was one of those weird things with just buy a troopie online, sight unseen, fly into
Yeah.
Australia.
How did that go?
Equip it. Awesome. Bizarrely awesome, right? I
And
thought
what version of a Land Cruiser did you
it's
get?
a 70 series,
70.
75 troop carrier.
Okay, got it.
1994. 'cause
Oh,
we
so
wanted
you
to
got
bring
it
it back
old
to the
enough.
States.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
old enough. But yeah, sight unseen. Turned out to be rust free. Turned out to be a truck that was owned by a guy who worked for Caterpillar and was a diesel mechanic and had taken immaculate care of it.
Winning.
Yeah.
Total spoof, right? But it had 400,000 kilometers on it,
Sure.
or 480, almost 500,000 K. And we just drove it down the Madigan line, did the Simpson Desert,
Yeah.
stored it for a year, went back, drove all the way across from Sydney to Perth, and then shipped it to South Africa.
Awesome.
Left it there for a year or a
Awesome.
couple of years, I think, and then flew in with Jonathan and Roseanne and did a whole Southern Africa trip, like Botswana, Namibia, and then realized. So this is kind of the caveat there. We were going to leave it in Southern Africa, and then realized that it's an Australian truck. It's in South Africa. We are in North America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you do the paperwork for that?
Yeah.
How does that one work out?
How does that paperwork?
Yeah.
And Connie and I have this big problem. We get emotionally attached to the vehicles we travel
Yeah.
in, and then we can't let them go. And so then we had to import it into the U.S. and so now we're building it up. And
Oh, I
actually,
love that.
Brian from Goose has just offered to do the interior of it.
Fantastic.
And he's
Yeah,
going
Yeah,
to do
he
the
was
interior.
talking. He's going to start
Yeah.
doing some like a production troopie system.
Oh, sweet.
system, which is fantastic.
I
And
love
so
that.
he's going to do that in the next couple months, and then we'll probably ship it back, and it'll be our vacation home living in South Africa.
I love that.
Which
That's
is awesome.
awesome. Now, how did you renew your carnet? I've never had a carnet long enough that I had to renew it. So, like, help people know, like, since it was because you had to have brought it in under a carnet to ship it in, right?
From
Australia.
From Australia, no, we didn't.
How
We
did you
actually
work that
We
out?
didn't actually use a carnet.
How did you work that out?
So in Australia, it was a native car, so it didn't need
Right.
anything. But into South Africa, the Southern African area, the SABC, I think,
Okay.
it includes South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
they have their own sort of temporary import permit, and we just used that.
Oh, wow. So that must be fairly recent then.
It was fairly recent, I think.
Yeah.
And then we just stored it with friends.
Awesome.
And the friends took care of all of that stuff.
Yeah, sure.
And so we didn't need a permit. We didn't need the carnet to go north.
Amazing.
Well, we would have if we'd gone north, but we didn't
sure.
go far enough north to need
Well, like Dan Grech did all of Africa without a carnet.
Yeah.
Because he came into Morocco first,
Yep.
which you can do on a tip.
Exactly.
And then he just did a temporary import all the way around.
All the way around, yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty. And he was the first one that I've been aware of to do that.
Yeah, and good for him. What an adventure to do that.
I mean, I'll say
thing.
though that a carnet is actually a really easy way to travel. The problem is if you do it on a new car, it's a ton of money, or you're posting a huge bond or big policy on it. But it's fast. Like you come up to the border, they open the carnet, they stamp it, tear off the thing, and you're on your way.
On your way, yeah, totally.
So a carnet is pretty easy.
But for an older vehicle that isn't valued that high. I mean, the Troopy, I think we paid $12,000 for it.
Yeah.
Like street value. So you get a carnet on that, it's
nothing.
It's
pennies.
It's nothing.
Yeah, it's
It's not bad.
Oh, how cool is that? So you did it. You were able to ship it into South Africa on a tip.
Yes.
Okay, so that's on that bombshell. Yeah. Okay, I don't know if anybody else cared about what just happened in this podcast, but that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And it is easy for a non-resident to buy a vehicle in Australia too.
It's not bad. It was
for sure.
completely on Gumbo. So Gumbo is like almost like Bring a Trailer. Only not quite. And just found a truck, emailed the guy, talked about it. Actually got in touch with Oz to USA, the guy who ran that website, and he happened to be in Oz at the time, and he test drove it for me, and he recommended I didn't buy it, and I was like, yeah, but I need to just pull the trigger on something, and so I pulled the trigger on it and lucked out, absolutely lucked out. And here's the thing, complete luck of the draw. I mean, I can't recommend it necessarily as a great way to do things because some people would have a bad experience with that. But
how did you register it in Australia?
You don't have to have any residency visas or anything.
You don't.
Just signed over the title and you kept the same plates and
kept the same plates. Had to register it twice because it was there for that long, and then that was the thing that became a problem because then it became non-registered while it was in South Africa. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
And honestly, people are terrified of rules and regulations and governments and things like that, but honestly, they're there just to do their job. It's like people at border crossings. People get paranoid about they're out to get you. No, they're there to do their job.
Yeah,
they're there to get people across the border. That's the whole point. That's why they live there. That's why they have this job. And maybe they don't enjoy it as necessarily like an absolute joy to pass people through the border, but if people are excited about crossing the border and excited to come to their country, they'll be like really nice to you.
And a lot of those folks those are high status jobs.
Totally. Yeah.
So you show them a little respect,
and
give them a smile.
They will love it.
Hand them a copy of your magazine.
Yeah, well, that works too. Yeah, totally, absolutely. Just show some joy to be there.
Yeah.
And that's something that they don't get very often.
Some gratitude about the opportunity to see their country, sure.
Yep. Because people are proud to be from the place they're from, right?
And in Africa, they have every right to be because, Africa is amazing.
It's one of those places that I didn't realize it, but you land in Africa. I didn't realize it until I went back. You land in Africa and you fundamentally feel like you're home.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that.
And it's one of those things that even people who weren't born there land there and they're like, there's something about this continent that's
where we're all from.
On the genetic wayback machine.
It's like there's something about the environment, the temperature, the surroundings are just like very optimal for
and it's
humans.
Very core. It's very you feel it in your core when you step off the plane and suddenly you're like slapped in the face.
There's some kind of genetic memory or something that goes back there.
Totally.
I've actually had people I've guided on trips in Southern Africa who have cried getting onto the plane.
I believe it.
Leaving.
I believe it.
Like that I was meant to be, even though it's scary as hell.
But that's part of it.
To be here. Yeah.
It's part of it.
Out of your comfort zone, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's a beautiful.
The first time that I heard a lion roar, it was unmistakable. I didn't know what a roaring lion sounded like, but when I heard it, it was unmistakable what it was.
Yeah,
and the hair that I don't have on the back of my head all stood up.
Exactly.
All stood up.
It's like,
it was unmistakable, like that was a lion, and I'm about to get et. You know.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
Suddenly, you're not on the top of the food chain. And
no
like,
longer.
Wow,
No longer.
Yes. But I think that sort of visceral experience is something every human on Earth needs to feel something like that at some point. It's so grounding. It gets you, I don't know, into a whole different space of appreciating what it is to live on planet Earth. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And I love taking people to those places, which is why I was a guide for a long time. I just love taking them out of their comfort zone and seeing that spark. Right?
Yeah.
You can do that in Central America too. You take them to a Mayan ruin and they climb up a pyramid that like only 20 people this year have climbed up this pyramid.
Sure.
And they're like, holy crap. There was a whole civilization. There was a whole
because that was your
thriving
most
community.
recent,
Yeah.
That was your most recent kind of big trip was
big
Central
trip was
America.
2023 when I made the film in Belize.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah,
I'd love
sure.
to, because
Yeah.
I haven't heard the details on that story. I'd love to hear about that.
So what it was is I used to guide trips with No Limit Expeditions back in Central America. And on the very, very first trip, I was actually there with Nick Taylor, and we were going to try to do this trip, this road called Camp 6, which Land Rover had used for the launch of the LR3, I think.
I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
So, we figured out where it was. We went to the entry port. We drove in, and it was just dense jungle. And we're out there with machetes in front of these trucks hacking away. And we get 1.7K in, and we're like, all right, we're going to have to camp because it's getting dark. So we camped, and we had what we thought was a week's supply of alcohol with us, and we finished it that evening. As you might. And then like I'm in my hammock between two trees, and at midnight like the rain started coming in, and it was just full on heavy rain, and it did not stop. We got up in the morning and everything's soaked, and we look at the track and it's just a wash of water going down, and we're like, there's no way we can carry on. So we turned around and we winched our way 1.7K back out, 80 foot at a time. And again, like I said, with the trip in Africa, where it was in my mind, I had to do this.
Yeah, sure.
That was now in my mind. I had to finish that track.
You had to come back.
I had to come back and do it. So in 2023, so 13 years later, came back and brought a friend of mine who's Josh White, who's been in this industry since 2003.
Yeah, filmmaker. Awesome guy.
An awesome guy. And you knew him, I knew him. And took him back, and he filmed it, and we went back to complete the trail.
Dude, how amazing is that?
Yeah.
One vehicle or two vehicles?
No,
or?
we had three. We had
nice.
two trucks who were on camera, and then basically a backup truck, which was actually a Jeep Grenadier, which was Nathan's.
Yeah.
So it was Nathan driving his truck with Josh.
Oh wow!
Being the film crew, and they filmed the whole
Nathan
thing.
brought his Grenadier down there too.
No, just his Jeep. So Gladiator. Sorry, not Grenadier. Gladiator. I get the G numbers.
That's okay. There's lots of crossover there.
Yeah. So anyway, the Gladiator and the two Defenders, and they filmed it, and we made a 55-minute film out of it, and that is now up for sale in Hollywood.
I love that,
and it's getting a lot of traction. It's getting a lot more traction than I thought it would. So
I'm sure it's awesome.
Wow. And so I made a pitch deck out of it to sell a series, and the series is basically going to be my passion now, which is to. I've seen a lot of these places that we go to, that we overland in, especially in North America, get closed down, get degraded because there's so much traffic there. And the conservation of those places has become like kind of my passion. So I want to sell the series as competent people doing amazing things in remote places. Yeah. People who this is not a reality show. This is whatever happens on the ground happens on the ground. Yeah. We didn't reshoot anything for that film. It was just a one take, the entire thing.
Yeah.
It was awesome, and I think it's kind of like its core selling point.
Well, you just brought up a really important point, Graham, which is like, how do we preserve these places for future generations? So for those that are listening, maybe you can give some advice on ways as overlanders that we can preserve the places that we visit, leave them better than we found it. How else can we give back as members of the community?
So just to just to reiterate on the base points are going to be like leave no trace, tread lightly. Those principles are out there. So look them up, follow those practices when you go out there. But there are other ways you can collect data for the scientific community. There are ways you can, there are apps out there like iNaturalist, Dark Skies. There's one for just looking at preserving waterways. Whatever your passion is, you can probably find some way to contribute data to that, to preserving that thing, like dark skies or quiet places or something like that. And I've been doing CO2 measurements, like ground level CO2, just as an atmospheric. I have found an atmospheric scientist at Colorado State University was just interested in remote area CO2 levels, like the respiration of the forest. It's not necessarily climate change, it's just the respiration, how the trees are, are breathing, and how it's going. So I'm taking instruments to go and do that on the ground, and then preserving, just documenting where wildlife is, what plants are there, what animals are there, and what birds are there. There's an app where you can identify animals just by switching on the app, and it will listen. And it will identify what birds are around.
eBird's really good for birding.
Yeah, exactly. And there's one called Myriad or something like that. It does something similar. And, just look into the thing that you're passionate about, that you'd like to preserve, and go out there and contribute to it. And I think that's one of those things that is kind of a little bit misunderstood, that overlanders in general terms, it's all about the journey, but if we can bring in all about the journey to preserving the places that we love to go
it's
for
purpose,
the future,
right?
It's purpose-driven, and then it becomes something bigger than you and more visceral for you. Just like we were talking about with seeing lions and things like that.
It becomes a little more than a vacation,
Yeah, exactly. And I think that resonates. I'm teaching a class about that here at Expo, and it really resonates with people. And people
you're
are like,
you're
holy crap,
a
that's
chemist by education, right?
By education, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and I mean, Graham, for those that are listening, Graham has done some of the most epic, main gear reviews for Overland Journal that we've ever done, including the water filter tests that included me having to deal with a whole bunch of lawyers because your tests were so good.
Yeah. And people were kind of upset.
Some of the companies are like, what?
That didn't work? No, we said it worked. Yeah,
that was a good one.
That's epic stuff, but I think that's what grounds people, right? They love this stuff, and again, the people in the community who just that brought reality about international travel and even travel in North America to people. Yeah, just like you, Matt, you're following our trip. Now you do that same sort of thing, right? It's just sort of following in and being inspired by people, and the inspiration that people like Scott and Jonathan and Roseanne and Tom Shepard and Chris Scott and all these people that we've mentioned, the inspiration that they've brought to people is just it just keeps us alive, and I think it makes us want to keep traveling and giving back.
Yeah,
and
we
Scott,
appreciate you doing that.
This thing is amazing, right? Writing a book about it is just, it's so cool.
You're a big part of that. So
I don't know. That was part of writing it. I think that was all on you. But
it was, but you were a lot of the inspiration and the sharing of knowledge.
It's the knowledge that we have, right? And I think one of my taglines that I'm trying to get out there is that training takes no payload.
Yeah.
The more you have in your head, the less you have to take with you. Because you've learned about it. You can actually take these things with you.
Yeah, isn't it the Maasai? I don't know if this is actually the attribution is correct, but I've heard it a few times. But the Maasai say, a warrior carries his experience on his back. Yeah. So the less experience you have, the more stuff you're going to have to carry with you. Yep. So start with training, and you'll be surprised how little you need to go around the world.
Jeez, it just seems to be a common theme that we talk about.
Keep them along. Yeah,
that's awesome. Exactly.
And then you're working on some other stuff too.
Yeah, let's talk about the future. What's coming up for Graham Jackson?
So the film thing that I mentioned, right, is hopefully if that sells, then I'll be doing a whole bunch of expeditions in remote areas, doing really cool stuff. But in the interim, while I was waiting for that to go on, you thought, and quite rightly, that writing a book about this stuff, kind of getting your knowledge down, is a great way to do it. And I thought, well, how can I do that for me? And it was to make an app. So I've got an app now that's full of checklists and guides. It's going to be coming out this summer, just for the Overland community.
What's it called?
It's called Overland Glove Box Guide.
I love that.
And it's just, just like a little thing you can have on your phone, whole bunch of information in there. It's going to be a curated but growing load of information about overlanding and products that I like, products that I recommend. And one thing that I love about it, that I keep popping into my head like a new idea that might work well in an app.
Yeah, sure.
Like I was at a Grenadier rally and people were trying to didn't know what like the off-road button actually does in the Grenadier. So I'm like, well, put that. So it's now in the app. You can select Ineos Grenadier as my vehicle, and it will tell you what off-road mode does.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Like all the
or how
things.
to activate the lockers.
How to activate,
because it's not super intuitive.
It's not super intuitive. And why does the light keep flashing when I deactivate them?
Sure.
And why does it flash for a long time?
Yeah.
That info's in there, and you can read it and say, "Oh,
that's awesome."
Cool. And actually, there are videos in there too. So yeah.
And if I remember, you have a Grenadier, is that right?
I do have a Grenadier. Yes.
So, tell us what you think.
All of my friends are buying Grenadiers.
It's all you, Matt.
What we call is we're all Nerds.
Nerds. I like that. So what do you think? I mean, you've owned Land Rovers your whole life, and now you have something that looks like a Land Rover but drives more like a Toyota. What do you think?
I'm torn. I have to tell you.
Tell us.
I'm torn because I've loved the thing from the very beginning, which is why I was an early adopter, why I consulted with them on accessories for the vehicle, talked to Ineos about it. When it first came out, I threw down my $450.
Yeah.
And when they sent me the build sheet, I built one.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I was a little inebriated at the time, so I didn't actually build what I wanted. But then a couple months later, they sent me this thing saying your truck's on the water. Prep up to drop the cash, and I did, and I've owned it for over a year, and I feel unfortunately like they maybe overpromised and underdelivered, and I would have preferred they'd gone the other way and underpromised and overdelivered. But I feel as a mechanical platform, it is phenomenal.
Yeah.
As a driving experience, I find it a little aggressive. Like it's aggressive towards the driver, and I would I'm the sort of person who, like I mentioned, solid axles, cloth seats, all that sort of thing. I like to feel like my vehicle is my partner.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel a little bit combative with the Grenadier. But
maybe give us some examples of that.
That's a personal experience. That's like when
I kind of get what you're saying, though.
The
steering
speed alarm goes off.
The alarm goes off. It's the steering. You gotta
work it, right?
Yeah.
It's got these little quirks, but again, quirks are why I love Defenders.
Yeah, of course.
I just have not fallen in love with the quirks of the Grenadier yet. And maybe I will. And that's something I feel like the Grenadier community, who I've actually interacted with, I feel the people are actually engaging with that and feeling like it is like a quirk of a vehicle that they might like. But yeah, the fuel alarm, it just drives me. It almost killed me the first time it went off because it was so loud. And I'm like, what the? Why do you have to yell at me so much just because the fuel's getting low? I just need a light that shows me that the fuel's getting low. That's all I need. That's all my Defender gives, and that's all I need.
Yeah, it's so aggressive.
It
too.
is.
It's like
that is true.
It's like you've just below half a tank, and then it like starts telling you,
yelling at you.
I mean, like. It could change color, like that's fine.
That's totally fine. But the thing is,
I don't need to know. I can see it. I'm looking right at it. It's right next to the speedo.
It's not just you're sitting in the seat and it goes off. That happens. But then you park, you go in, you get your food, whatever.
Yeah.
You're still at like lower than a quarter
a
of a
third
tank.
of a tank or whatever. Yeah.
And you come in and you unlock the car and you open the door and immediately the alarm goes off again and you're like, What are you yelling at me about?
That gong, yeah.
And that is the fuel alert going off again. And I'm not even sitting in the driver's seat and the engine isn't switched on.
I was just talking.
It's just those little things.
I was just talking to the service guy for the local Ineos dealer, and it's where I bought mine. And he was saying that they have the new software downloaded, but they cannot upload it. So it's like very imminent. But I'm very curious as to how much of this feedback, because they're pretty clear things that people are like, why are you doing this? Like, there's no reason to do it.
Right.
It will be interesting. I think there's a lot of hope for this software update
There's a lot of hope, but they did say that it was going to come out a year ago, so I think that's one of those things.
Yeah,
and
there's been a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it is imminent. It is imminent.
Next week.
Though.
It's next week. It's next week. We've been hearing that for so long.
But again, I love it, and I don't want to say bad words necessarily about Ineos on a podcast, but my
but it's important for us to be honest with the 100%. Listeners so that they know.
But my encapsulation of the Grenadier, actually, I think was last night in a discussion with you, Matt, was it's British arrogance in a metal box. And as a Brit, I can say that, right? I see it in there, and it's just like, yeah, that's kind of, they have
cool.
They have a bit of a dismissive attitude about, all the problems that little people are having with our car, but we are telling them how it should be.
Yeah.
But actually, we're the community of people who drive this thing for real in the real world.
Well, hopefully there's some things that are listened to, right?
Yeah,
and we'll know a lot.
I hope
soon.
so.
In the next couple months, I think we'll have a really good idea.
So. And that's great. If they listen to the community, that'll be gold.
Well, they do care about what the community thinks, for
and
sure.
I think they do. And I know Lynn put out a response to a letter on the Grenadier forum saying that they were going to listen to the community more, and she appreciated.
She's
the
been great,
and so that's great. And
she's been great,
and that's
Rockstar.
Fantastic. If the head of the company is willing to do that, then that they're coming into the place that I think we've been talking about in this entire podcast. Is that it is a community, right?
Yeah.
It's a community thing, and we're the people that they were aiming at. And I think maybe they thought maybe we weren't the community they were aiming at, but now they've come to realize that
these are the people that buy the car.
These are the people who have adopted the car. These are the people who have a passion about the car, and therefore these are the people they need to listen to. And I think they're turning the corner to realize that. That is the perfect place to be. So
I agree.
That's great. And
I agree.
I think it's a bright future for the overland world in general. And I think there's a lot of companies out there who are kind of in that mode, right? Mm-hmm. They're making this world of ours a better place.
I agree.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you coming on. You've been such an important part of this community, of this industry for such a long time. You're a formative a component in its formation.
I feel like a speck of dust in the on a cog in a wheel of a bigger thing.
You and me both, and it's grown well beyond us, which is what we always wanted.
Right.
And you've contributed so much to the health of this community, the authenticity of this community, Graham, and I'm grateful for everything you've done for Overland Journal and Expedition Portal and the community in general.
So, and I appreciate I think it's a great place to be.
Yeah, it is a great place to be.
Yep.
Awesome.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to the Overland Journal podcast. We'll catch you next time.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.